Roy Blunt, a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, welcome back.
Good to be with you.
What can you add to what we just heard from Catherine Herridge?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is just such a broad band of potential attacks. We hear from our own intelligence community and have for years now more threats from more directions than ever before. You see the terrible Manchester bombing, those young people, mostly young women, young girls, with a fairly sophisticated bomb. Based on published reports on that. These guys have a van and kitchen knives. We think other groups are looking at more advanced kinds of attacks, and so clearly this is from all directions. ISIS tends to take credit for the things that you can steal a truck, get your van, drive in a car, terrorize people with very little planning or backup. Other groups, we believe, are looking at other things, and we are constantly have to be vigilant. And I think Secretary Kelly is right when he says that only because we have been fortunate and worked hard to prevent this have we not had these kind of attacks here.
I want to play a clip from British Prime Minister May today. Here it is.
While the recent attacks are not connected by common networks, they are connected in one important sense. They are bound together by the single evil ideology of Islamist extremism.
Any explanation as to why we have now seen 3 fatal terror attacks in Britain in less than 3 months?
I don't know if there's any real explanation for that, but in Paris, in London, in Western Europe generally, you've got people who came there to do jobs that were allowed to stay in enclaves, never became part of the society. You see the second generation of those families often turning to what the Prime Minister mentioned. We need to say it. We need to talk about it. Our friends who are Muslim need to admit that this extreme sense of Islam that results in these attacks has to be called for what it is, and we have to try to do what we can to intervene.
Do we have, I've heard the argument that because we're beginning to roll back ISIS in the so-called caliphate in Iraq, in Syria, that there's an increased emphasis on attacks, these kind of low technology attacks in the West. Do you think our success in one place is creating more of a threat?
I think it can. And, somebody made the observation not long ago that sometimes countries implode. Syria seems to have exploded. That as things change in Syria, people have access to Europe in ways that you would otherwise want to try to do something about. There's no way to do background checks on people that come in from communities that no longer exist, jobs that were jobs months or years ago, and so I think we do see that. And like so many of the things that have happened in Northern Africa, what people initially thought would be the result turned out to be just the opposite.
As a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, any indication of an increased terror threat here in the U.S.?
I think the terror threat is real. One of the things when we've seen things like San Bernardino, more often than not, U.S. officials, the FBI and others talked to these people after months of surveillance, decided that they no longer needed to be under the level of watch they were, and then suddenly these kinds of things happen. I do think, again, that you've got some groups that are looking at a big play, like taking down an airliner. You've got others who need very little support, very little planning, and can do incredible damage, which is actually, in many ways, almost more of a terrorism, because you go anywhere, do anything, you wonder what could happen at any moment. It could happen
London
here.
Bridge on a Saturday night.
London Bridge, the Westminster Bridge, the concert,
yeah.
all of these things are true terror targets. They're not. It's not like going after the U.S. Embassy.
Right.
They are true terror targets.
As Catherine mentioned, just after the news broke about this terror attack, President Trump tweeted another call for his travel ban. That case is now before the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you think the justices should pay attention to the kind of thing that is happening in England and other parts of the world as they make that decision? I mean, the fact is, in Britain, most of these terrorists have been homegrown. They've been UK citizens.
They have been, and looking at where people like that who are coming to our country have been is important. I'm not nearly as concerned as a lot of people are about the visa waiver program, because the visa waiver program just triggers that you can spend more time on people who you have reason to believe may have been in Libya, may have been in Syria, may have become radicalized. I don't know what the court will decide. I'm not a lawyer. I think my view is the president does have certainly the right to put in place extreme vetting. Chris, it's been 4 months since they said they needed 4 months to put that in place. I think you can do that without a travel ban, and hopefully we are.
I want to talk to you about another hat as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. A lot of anticipation about the testimony this week from former FBI Director James Comey. What do you expect to hear from him? What questions do you have for him?
Well, I think it's important that we talk to everybody that should be talked to about this. I do believe that the Senate Intelligence Committee is the most likely place to bring this investigation to conclusion, with whatever the conclusion turns out to be. Used to dealing with each other on issues like this, so we're used to classified documents. We're used to coming together to protect the country. Hopefully that's what we'll be able to do.
What are you looking for from Comey?
What Comey says and how he says it, I think, will be important. I haven't, frankly, understood much of what Comey has done since about a year ago. And his decisions have been, I think, highly questionable. We'll see why he was prepared for that meeting the way he was. Said he had a round of murder board kind of questions before he went to see the president, why he thought it was important to immediately download that, and what other meetings he had that, frankly, he didn't think were so important to download what happened.
Finally, do you think that President Trump has a legitimate claim to executive privilege to block Comey from testifying? And as a practical matter, do you think he should invoke it?
I think the president is better served by getting all this information out sooner rather than later. Let's find out what happened and bring this to a conclusion. You don't do that, I think, by invoking executive privilege on a conversation you had apparently with nobody else in the room. Most stories have two sides to them. At some point, we'll hear the president's side, but I frankly think we need to hear Mr. Comey's side and find out what other questions we need to ask after he answers the questions this week.
Senator Blunt, thank you. Thanks for your time this Sunday, and thank you for coming in on short notice.
Glad to be here.
Up next, President Trump's dramatic decision this week to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord. We'll talk with EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, a key player in the president's deliberations.